One time you can lay some of their bodies and I did too.
Yeah, I know.
That cutting up like meat.
Well, I've seen bodies cut up worse than you've ever seen a body cut up.
Tastes like real meat when it got barbecue sauce on it, don't it?
Well,
Henry Lee Lucas and Ottis Toole killed hundreds of people together. Or so they claimed. In the 1970s, this serial killer couple embarked on a horrific murder spree across the United States. They assaulted, killed, and even cannibalized unsuspecting victims wherever they went. And if Lucas is to be believed, they killed more than 600 people together, an astounding claim. Welcome back to True Stories. Join our family in exploring some of the most twisted true crime cases. As always, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe. Now, let's get into it. Henry Lee Lucas and Ottis Toole met in 1976 at a soup kitchen. They quickly became lovers, jump-starting a relationship that was based on mutual attraction and a mutual desire to kill. Both Lucas and Toole had been raised by abusive mothers who had forced their sons to dress like girls. Both had suffered sexual trauma before the age of 10. And by the time they met, both were already murderers. In fact, Lucas had already served 10 years in prison for the murder of his mother. He had killed her in 1960, when he was 23 years old. All I remember was slapping her alongside the neck, Lucas would later tell the police. When I went to pick her up, I realized she was dead. Then I noticed that I had my knife in my hand, and she had been cut. Lucas had long despised his mother for abusing him. He also hated the fact that she was a sex worker and forced him to watch as she serviced customers. When he was just 10, he lost an eye because his mother ignored an infection for too long. By the time Lucas reached puberty, he channeled his rage into torturing animals and sexually assaulting his own brother. As for Toole, his childhood was just as bad, if not worse. He was assaulted by almost every person he thought he could trust. His mother dressed him up as a girl, his older sister sexually assaulted him before he was 10 years old, and his father prostituted him to a neighbor when he was only 5. When he was just 14 years old, Toole killed a person for the very first time. After a traveling salesman tried to pick him up for coitus, Toole ended up running him over with his own car. Drawn together by shared childhood trauma, Henry Lee Lucas and Ottis Toole quickly fell for each other. And when they realized that they both had a taste for blood, they soon embarked on a cross-country killing spree. Henry Lee Lucas and Ottis Toole traveled across 26 states in the 1970s, killing wherever they went. They preyed upon anyone they could find, including hitchhikers, sex workers, and migrants. For Lucas and Toole, killing was just a way for the young couple to bond. They talked about it openly, comparing notes and giving each other tips. Henry Lee Lucas later claimed that he coached Toole on how to get away with murder. He was doing his crimes all one way, Lucas said. I started to correct him in his ways, in doing the crime, where he wouldn't leave information. But Lucas and Toole didn't just kill. Often, they would sexually assault and torture their victims before murdering them. And after their victims were dead, the couple would mutilate the bodies. Lucas later said that they didn't feel the slightest amount of guilt for their actions. He even joked that he once crossed 2 state lines with someone's severed head in the backseat. As if that weren't bad enough, the serial killer couple also dabbled in cannibalism. Years after their arrest, they were caught discussing cannibalism over a prison phone. Toole sounded almost nostalgic. Remember how I like to pour some blood out of them, he asked Lucas. Some tastes like real meat when it's got barbecue sauce on it. While it might seem like these two terrifying men were made for each other, their relationship fell apart when Henry Lee Lucas became interested in Ottis Toole's teenage niece, Becky Powell. Lucas later said that he liked having someone look up to him, so he ran off with her and left Toole alone. Toole was so upset that he allegedly killed 9 people just to blow off steam. But Henry Lee Lucas and Becky Powell didn't make it very far. While they apparently settled down on a ranch in Ringgold, Texas, the two soon got into a heated argument. In response, Lucas lured Powell to an isolated field. He then killed her, dismembered her body, and scattered the remains. Then, Lucas lured the woman who owned the ranch out to the same field, killed her, and stuffed her body into a drainage pipe. Soon afterward, Lucas was arrested in Texas in 1983. Meanwhile, Toole was separately imprisoned in Florida in 1984 for burning a 64-year-old man alive. At long last, the killer couple was behind bars. But the mystery behind their murder spree had just begun. Surprisingly, Henry Lee Lucas wasn't arrested for murder. He'd been snagged for possession of a deadly weapon. But once he was in custody, he began to talk about his murders to any police officer who would listen. As for Ottis Toole, he was far more reluctant to talk about his crimes at first. But once he learned that Lucas was taking cops on guided tours of their murder sites, Toole soon began backing up his former lover's claims. By his count, they'd murdered 108 people, including 6-year-old Adam Walsh, the son of future America's Most Wanted host John Walsh. Toole insisted that he was the young boy's murderer. He even argued with the police when they doubted his claims. He told them, "Oh, no, I killed him too, there's no doubt about that." According to Toole, he had snatched the child from a Sears parking lot in 1981. After decapitating the young boy with a machete, Toole drove around with the head in his car for so long that he forgot it was there. When he later happened upon it, he simply tossed it into a canal. Walsh was perhaps one of the most well-known victims killed by Toole or Lucas, since his murder would result in new child protection laws and his father getting into television and criminal justice. Meanwhile, Henry Lee Lucas readily confessed to more than 600 murders. But he had his own motivations for doing so, far beyond bringing the truth to light. "I made the police look stupid," Lucas later boasted. "I was out to wreck Texas law enforcement." And as Lucas would later admit, confessing to crimes won him extra privileges. The police would often drive him out to the scene of the crime and even let him get fast food on the way. For a man who had already been sentenced to death row, confessing to murder upon murder was just a way to spend some time outside. For a long time, police took Henry Lee Lucas and Ottis Toole at their word. Lucas's confessions were so plentiful that they led the Texas Rangers to establish a Henry Lee Lucas task force assigned to oversee his crimes. In turn, Lucas offered the Rangers gratuitous and grisly details of every single murder he confessed to. He even drew detailed pictures of his alleged victims, much like another prolific serial killer named Samuel Little. Eerily, Lucas's pictures were so precise that they even included eye color. But then, his confessions began to slowly unravel. As time went on, law enforcement began to pick up on some major discrepancies in Lucas's timelines. Plus, DNA testing began to contradict some of his stories. And on top of that, Lucas didn't offer much hard evidence to back up his increasingly far-fetched tales. It was later revealed that some members of the task force assigned to him secretly provided him with evidence and asked him leading questions in an attempt to get more confessions. That said, some Texas Rangers remained convinced that he was telling the truth about at least some of the murders. Lucas himself admitted to exaggerating and making up stories. "I only got 3 murders," he claimed. "But they go wild every time I tell them about some more." Given Lucas's habit of lying, it's impossible to know what his real body count was. The same goes for Ottis Toole. To this day, no one is exactly sure how many people Henry Lee Lucas and Ottis Toole killed. Toole died of liver failure in prison in 1996. Lucas died of heart failure in prison in 2001, taking the truth about their crimes with him to the grave. We've come to the end, thank you for watching. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe. Till next time.